When was the first time you really felt like you started to feel comfortable on stage, do you think?
I don't know. I think it comes in like different. I think your level of comfort, your understanding of the level of comfort is changes over the years. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the first couple of times, I did well my first couple of times because I didn't know that it was supposed to be. I didn't know what bombing was. I didn't know how bad it could be because I did well
Right.
the first couple of times. And then I bombed and I was like, oh, that is the worst feeling in the world. You know what I mean? You start then that's in your head, you know what I mean? Of like, oh, that's going to happen every single time. This is the scariest thing in the world. Um,
Do you
but
do you think it's important? Like, how important do you think those first couple sets are that you do well? Because I know some people that don't. They go up and they bomb for the first year and they never do well until
mhm.
like year two. But I had a similar experience when I started, and I don't think if I had done well my first two or three times, I'd be doing comedy right now. You know?
Dude, I'm the same way. Like, I mean, it was like devastating. Like I did
Yeah.
it and I had like such stupid confidence of like, I was literally like, oh, I'm the greatest comedian. I did like looking back, it was probably horrible, horrible. It had to be horrible. Um, but like I got laughs where I wanted to get laughs and like riffed a couple of lines. And then like I did it in Philly at Helium was the first time I ever got up, first couple of times. And then I went to the a place called the Raven Lounge to do a show there and killed, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like,
Right.
oh, I'm literally like the funniest guy. Like these fucking idiots, get out of my way. I'm the funniest guy in the world. And then I didn't know how comedy worked either. So I wrote 5 new minutes. I just thought like, I didn't know you just worked on material. Like I was just like, oh, I'll write 5 new minutes this week and go do that. Uh, and they had me like close out the show at the Raven Lounge because like somebody wasn't in the room. They're like, oh, this guy did well last week. Like, let's put him up.
Right.
And I mean, like, bombed the most miserable death. Like, and my partner H Foley, who put me on the show, he was like, "Hey man, I need a good set out of you. You got to close out the first half." I'm like, "All right." And I watched the disappointment in his face after like 10 seconds of being on stage, and he left the room, and I was like, "Oh, this is the worst feeling in the world."
Dude, there is nothing worse than someone throwing you a bone, giving you a shot, and knowing, like actively knowing that you're ruining it for them.
Oh,
Like,
like watched it in real time happen. Like he was like,
right.
I first riffed it and do well, set first, and just I saw like the life leave him of like, I just ruined the night.
Was it the thing where like you were like, I'm gonna say something about the room, I'm gonna say something off script that'll get them, and then I'll go into material? Was that
Of
what?
course, because I'm coming
All right.
in with like I'm the funniest guy. I've done this 3 times, and every
Yeah.
time I've done super well, better than the people that have been, that seem like they've been doing this like a year or working at, like the common open micers that were there, like already in the scene working. And I was like, oh, I'm literally the funniest guy. I told myself literally after my second night, I'm like, if I'm not famous in a year, I'm gonna give this up. Like that's how delusional I was of what comedy was.
Dude, the swing of like being like, no one talked about this yet. No one's mentioned this part of the room or this audience member, and that missing, dude, that is such a big whiff. Because when that
Oh,
doesn't go well, I mean, that is from the start they don't like it.
yeah, and then you've just proven you can't even be funny in the moment. Like you can't even come up with one line to
Right.
get it to work. I did that in New York a couple of years ago. Like there became a thing at like the bar shows of like we have a DJ. Like we have a DJ. Like every new bar show that popped. That's what happens in New York. Like one bar show gets successful and like cool and hip, and then everybody just mirrors that. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
multiple people hosting. This kind of thing. This thing. But we were in like the DJ phase where I mean, there would be like 3 people in the audience, and like they would be paying a DJ like $150 to be. It was like the
Yeah.
stupidest thing. And I'm like, it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, I thought I had a fantastic line on the DJ, like kind of taking a shot at him, but like nice, lighthearted. And like he had been kind of going back and forth a little bit, like he was mic'd up. So I'm like, and it's one of those things like the longer you think about it, like I was sitting in the room for like an hour. Like if they would have
Yeah.
just been like, hey, you're going up right now, and I thought of it, it would have worked because I would have been in my head. But like I reworked it for like 45 minutes. And, now I'm like workshopping this riff and it bombed. And the DJ went, oh. And like I was just like, this is the saddest moment, and like that I've experienced in years. Because there's 4 people at the show who don't want to be there.
Right.
They like the DJ more than they like me. I just got on stage 4 seconds ago.
And now, like, the only person who may be like friendly to you is now upset with you.
I've alienated myself. I broke all alliances that like might have been there. You know what I mean? Like now he's like digging through his records. Like he doesn't care what I'm doing.
Right. Dude, a DJ at a comedy show is either that is never like in the middle. Like if there's a DJ at a comedy show, it's either like that was the best show ever, it was a party, or like that was so bad the DJ played music during my set. Like it never is right down the middle. Like it was fine. It was fine.
It's never that. It's always too like it's always awkward to. There needs to be like a certain threshold of people for there to be a DJ where it's like this makes sense. You know,
Right.
like if there's like a long walk to the stage, you know, like yeah, maybe fill it with some music. But like we would be in a bar show, like literally smaller than my apartment. And they'd be like, what
Yeah.
song do you want to come up to? I'm like, it's fucking 2 feet. Wait, he's not even gonna be able to hit play, but and then like they're playing, I'm standing there, they're like still playing the song. I'm like, this is a fucking mess. What are we doing? Let's just tell jokes here.
Yeah, dude, the I think it's too off topic, but like sometimes like the image of the show takes over of like the actual show, you
It's the
know,
worst.
where people are like, I'd rather this look cool on Instagram or whatever, the flyer or the picture, than actually just be like, you know, it would work if we kicked this guy out and we put these 4 people in the front row and we all
Sure,
did
of
5 minutes. That would be
Yes,
great.
that's the show. The show should at this point be 32 minutes long.
Right.
Everybody, the comics do okay and have fun. They get by. The audience goes, okay, I'm not held hostage. I'm enjoying myself. And there's no need for a DJ or a photographer or, pyrotechnics or anything. Like just do the fucking show for the 4 people.
The photographer to show with like 4 people, you're like, hey, can you get the angles right? You know, just
Yeah,
to
and you
try
can
to.
always tell it's like we've seen enough. I've been at enough bad shows that like then there's pictures of me on stage where I'm like, you've taken it directly behind the only 2 audience members that were there, and I'm pretty sure one of them is a comic's girlfriend and like uncle or something.
Right.
And
Yeah.
like they just like get it, like packed house. I'm like, it was not a packed house. We all bombed. We shouldn't be taking pictures of this.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go back to that year 1 or 2 where you're feeling like you're on top of the world. What do you think the most you had to do for the least return was? Like those years are so filled with I gotta go 6 hours for $50 to do a guest set, or no money and this. What do you think in those first couple of years? What was the most you've extended yourself or the farthest you went for the least amount of return, whether it be stage time or money?
Yeah, one time. I mean, so I started in Philly, and this is when you were like, you get addicted to like it becomes your social life. It becomes it becomes everything. You know what I mean? You're
Right.
like, you're just in it and you're like, stage time. And there was I think it was maybe like a Friday or Saturday night. I didn't have any like spots. And that was the thing, like in Philly, you could get like, in the surrounding suburbs, or like there might be a bar show, but like it was typically like during the week, there was bar shows and open mics that were kind of like bar shows, they would have crowds and stuff during the week. And then on the weekends, like you would go to the surrounding, we would go to Jersey an hour away or whatever. And the shows tended to be pretty good considering, there would be people there and they would pay you like, $20 or $50 or something. But the one time I didn't have spots. I just got like juiced up in the fact of like, like the romance behind it. Like, let's go find a spot, but So we went to Reading, Pennsylvania, which I don't even know how far. I had never been there. I've heard about it like on paper. And this other comic convinced me. So I drove like an hour to pick him up. And it ended up being an open mic. But you had to like sign up for something, dude. And we drove, I think it took us like 4 hours to get there. And now I'm thinking, you always have a picture of the gig in your head. Like it's going to be like Vegas. You know what I mean? You're going to walk in, there's going to be a line full of, 300 people waiting to get in. And you're going to walk there. You're like, oh my God, Kevin, right this way. I still have that now, knowingly no shows are ever like that. In my head, I'm still like, it's going to be a 10 out of 10 fantastic when I get there.
Right.
So we pull up and it's in a fucking bowling alley with like 4 people there. And the reality of that moment hit me like a ton of bricks. And I didn't even do well. Like I like struggled because now I'm like nervous. I'm in my head. It's like that whole thing. I'm like, I just drove fucking 4 hours to do 5 minutes for, in a bowling alley. Like, what the hell am I doing?
Dude, that is, I don't know a comic that doesn't have that experience where like it always involves usually somebody else telling you how fun it's going to be, how good it's going to be, where they're like I started in Pittsburgh and I remember a buddy of mine was like, hey, will you drive me to this show in Cleveland? And you get a spot. I was like, absolutely, let's do it. We're on the road,
We're on the road, baby.
yeah.
Let's go.
Like I'm
Let's
making
do it.
a
We're
flyer, right?
Yeah.
And we get to this bar, and it's an open mic. It's not a show. It's an open mic, and we go like second and second to last. Like we were the last 2 comics that went up, and I'm like, man, this is not like what I thought it was going to be. This is not what you thought it was going to be. Obviously,
it never is that picture because we get so blunt because we're in, we're like, not to sound corny, like we're like upset, we're like the artists, so we're like the romance of it. That's what blinds us. That's what keeps you coming back. That's why people don't quit after their 3rd time because you're like, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be on the road. I'm gonna be, the guy getting recognized at the airport or whatever. And like none of that shit ever. I mean, it never comes into fruition.
Yeah, right. It never like very rarely do you go to one of those shows and you're like, that was actually better than I thought it was going to be.
Never. It's never better than you thought. It's like maybe 1 out of 100. You're like, phew. And that's only as you get older and you've been in it longer where they're bad,
Yes,
like, oh,
and it has to be so bad to begin with, right? Yeah. To where your expectations are so low that they can only go up.
This was a couple of years ago. Not that, I mean, like, I had been in it, this is probably maybe 3 years ago. I was like, I gotta, you're banging your head against the wall in New York trying to get spots and, whatever, get tapes to get all this stupid shit. And I'm like, I want to do longer sets. So I'm like, I'm going to just take whatever road gig I can get, even if I'll break even, I'll just still benefit of like, oh, I have these, like, I'm getting 5 or 4 30-minute, 25-minute, whatever spots on the road, like as a feature or whatever, or a co-headliner. So I took this run of shows in the middle of nowhere. I think I flew into like I don't know. It's the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I don't know if you're familiar. It's like Canada. So I fly into like 10 feet from Canada. And I land and I'm like, still like, dude, it's like January 14th. Like there's 9 feet of snow on the ground. The guy that picks me up, it's like, he's in a car, like we're in a snowstorm and he's in like a 92 Toyota Corolla and like the car is shaking. And I'm like, what's that all about? He goes, oh, there's just frozen ice on my tires. So like, that's going to happen. I'm like, oh, cool. So he was like a car service. He wasn't like a comic or anything. And I was like, knowingly, like, dude, I'm like looking out over vast land of nobody that I just flew like 4 hours to get here. And I'm like, have you ever been to the comedy shows at the casino? And he goes, because I'm hoping he's like, oh, the fucking Eddie Murphy was here last week. They're fantastic, and I know it's going to suck, but I'm hoping. I'm blinded by, like, I got the rose colored glasses on. And I'm like, have you ever been to the comedy show at the casino? Because it's weekly. And he goes, yeah, I go every Thursday night. And I'm like, oh shit, this is shaping up. Like, here we go. This is it. I'm like, you go every week? He goes, yeah, man, haven't missed one in like 3 years. I'm like, this is going to be fantastic. I'm like, are they any good? And he goes, nah, they're terrible. And I'm like, well, then why do you go? He's like, it's the only place you can smoke indoors. He goes, the whole town goes. I'm like, what the fuck? And it was the worst gig I've ever done, given like the investment and the flight and not one part. I mean, most of this audience had their back to me.
Yeah.
No, they brought me up. They go, here's Kevin. So like nobody even like can't, like, not that like my Gotham, my Access TV TV credit was gonna, really turn their necks,
Right.
But they were like, oh shit, this guy's been on channel 857. Let's tune in.
Yeah.
But nobody even like batted an eye at me, and like they're like, you got to do 35. So I'm just sitting there for 35, and that's like one of the gigs where you do 90 minutes of material in 35 minutes because
Right. Right.
there's no reaction,
Yeah.
there's no pause for laughter, so you're just mulching material. Nobody cares. I mean, it was chaotic.
Yeah. And did they put you up at least, or were you fronting your own travel?
No, they did. They did. Well, it was like a horrible run. So it was like I flew into Sault Ste. Marie or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Fucking middle of nowhere, like nothing. And I met a guy from Chicago who I actually just saw like 2 weeks ago when I was in Chicago. Joe Kilgallen, very funny comic out of Chicago. He drove like 6 hours to meet me. Like took the gig last minute. He was like, screw it. Like it was like, a couple of bucks. And he's like, I get to run. He was like getting to do an hour. He was getting ready to film his hour or something. So he's like, I'll take it just for the reps. So he drove, I got in his car, never met the guy, except but I didn't even meet him before the show. Like he got in late or so. I was on stage when he got there. So we got to get up in the morning, get in his car. And we drove like 9 hours to Duluth or La Crosse, Wisconsin or something like that. One of those cities. Did a same thing, pulled into like a motel where the show was, literally walked right up on stage, did the show, went to bed, got up, drove like another 9 hours to the other city to do that. And it was just, I was literally like, we weren't even in the second city. And I'm like, I'm never fucking doing this ever again. Like,
Yeah.
he ended up being a nice guy, but I'm like, this guy be a fucking serial killer. He could kill me and throw me in Lake Michigan. Nobody would ever know.
And I'm in the car with him for hours on hours on hours.
Yeah. I'm like, luckily we got along. Like,
Right.
I mean, he was like, we're similar age, whatever. So it was like easy. But I'm like, if I had to do this with like one of those old school headliners who was like 75 years old, doing like Lorena Bobbitt jokes or something, I'd fucking kill myself.
Dude, they have clubs like that out in like the I guess Midwest and the South, where it's like you do like a 3-week run for these specific clubs,
very specific
yeah,
bookers and clubs.
And you stay in a house with like the feature act and the MC and the headliner all do like the 3 clubs in like 3 weeks, and so like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're just living with these dudes. And then going to another house, and you're living with these, and it's like, you're like, what is going on here? Like, does nobody have a corporate number for a Radisson?
Yeah,
like,
it's insane. And that was the last trip, because the last night of that trip, we had got out there. I think it was like the run was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That sounds about right. And we get, I think Friday, we find out Saturday that they were supposed to put us up. The last show of the night the last show of the run was supposed to put us up, but they were like, oh, they're not putting us up anymore. But they're going to give you like a $40 travel buyout, like for a hotel room. Like you can't get a fucking hotel room for $40. So I'm like, whatever. But my flight was at like, I think I had to be, my flight was like, I was the first flight out. So the next morning, so my flight had to be like 6 o'clock. So I'm like, oh, if I got to get there at 4:30 or whatever, the last show's over at midnight. I'm like, maybe I don't know. I'm like, I'm gonna wing it. I'm not getting a hotel out of principle just because like fuck it. Like, so I ended up like sleeping. The host of the show was a local guy, and he was staying at a friend's house who was like, and I was just like, hey man, because the bar's like, you got to go.
Right.
So and I'm like, fuck. I was just like with my luggage in this bar, and they're like, you got to get out of here. It's like 2:15 or whatever. So I call up the feature or message the feature or the host, like, hey, can I come crash at your place for a couple of hours? And he's like, I'm at my friend's house. I'm like, this is desperate, dude. I'm like, it's too, now I can't get a hotel room. Like my phone's dying. I'm like, you gotta let me come over. And they're like, all right. So they were just staying up doing drugs the whole day. Like, I don't even know what drugs they were doing, but they weren't just like sitting around smoking pot. And it was just like, I like walked in and like, it doesn't bother me. I've grown up with a lot of, whatever. I've been in my fair share of shady situations, but I'm like, I just looked over and just was like, I'm not even going into the kitchen. It was like a scene out of Blow. Like it was just like the one light hanging and like these two fucking savages just, consuming whatever they could. And I slept for like 3 hours on that couch. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
we treat ourselves like animals for some reason. I'm like, so I go, my whole thing was like, I just started taking losses on the road because it's like, and you're like, oh, maybe if I don't need the hotel room because I'll do with it. And I go, just get the fucking hotel. And we do that now. We go on the road. I go, I'll lose fucking money because I'm not being uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable too many times. So we're going to get the Airbnb for the extra day. We're going to rent the car. We're going to do whatever the fuck we have to do because I'm never being in a position where I'm sleeping on someone else's fucking couch. It's just not happening.
Dude, that is so relatable because it's like a parent that finally snaps, where you're like, I swear to God, we'll never come here again. Where you're like, you get to that point in your career where it's no longer like, this is fun, we're doing it, couch surfing, to where you're like, I need a shower. I need to stop feeling so stressed about missing a show or not being able to sleep the night before a flight, missing a flight. Like, you're like, forget it. It's worth it to get the place. It's always worth it.
100%. And it's anytime there's a question, and like I do all like the book, like all the booking of like the rooms and the cars and Airbnb or whatever. And like whatever, there's an option to be like, if I might be uncomfortable, like if I just head to my bed, I go, we'll get at the hotel room for the extra night, or like I'll pay extra not to fly out at 6:15 a.m. Because I'm like,
yeah,
I go on the road. Like I just had to book tickets this morning. I'm like, we're going on the road, and I'm like, we're doing the show. I'm not waking up 4 hours after the show ends, like,
right.
Because that just sucks. Because then you're worried, like, am I going to miss the flight? I'm like, it's so unenjoyable because I'm just worried about missing the flight, even while I'm on stage. Of like, well, we got to get out of here. We got to wrap up. We got to get back to the place. We got to clean it, And I'm like, no, I will fly out at noon and I'll pay the extra $50 because it's not worth the headaches and the stress to not be comfortable.
Yeah, I feel like you could never convince a comic, at least me, to like go camping because it's like I've been uncomfortable for the last, the first 5 years of my career. I was extremely uncomfortable every time I was either on the road or performing or traveling to a show. So now my life is just about finding comfort in every possible way.
That's all it is. And my wife will be like, maybe if we don't need, like, if when we go on vacation, I'm like, no, we're not taking the fucking bus when we land in the place. I'm not waiting. I'm not learning a new public transportation system.
Right.
I'm not doing it. I'm getting a fucking Uber, or I'll pay a guy $5,000. I don't even have it, but I'm like, I'll pay a guy $5,000 to take me to the hotel because it's not worth the time, the headaches. And I'm like, I've been lost in cities. I've gotten on the wrong train. I've waited for the wrong bus. Like all of that shit for years. I'm just like, I'm just not doing it anymore.
And you've done all of those things with the stress of doing comedy, either
with the stress of I have to perform, I have to be funny in 3 hours, like, which is insane. I think that was a Chris Rock thing. Like anybody can be funny, but it's like be funny at Friday at 8. It's like, I'm like, I have to go do this job, and I'm also worried about like what time the 84 bus comes. It's like I can't. I'm not worried about that. I can't. And we go out now, and we bring our producer and comic buddy Toby to open up for us, and he's like a skater, and like he's like, this is like his first run at the road and stuff like that. So he's like, I got a buddy's house, we can crash in Chicago. I'm like, you're fucking nuts if you think I'm staying in someone else's house. Or he's like, when we get there, he's like, Ubers are going to be pretty expensive. Let's take like the blue line into the city, then we'll transfer. I'm like, dude, no, we're coming. I'm like, I'll take a loan out to not have to fucking struggle or like be inconvenienced on the road. I live in New York. I'm inconvenienced every fucking day, every second I'm here. I'm not going somewhere else to struggle as well. And then all with the lingering over my head of like, oh fuck, we have to be funny. Like, you know what I mean?
And in this city is such like it's a gauntlet of inconvenience, like you were saying, Like, I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten on the wrong train after a bad show, and I'm just like, dude, I'm moving home. I'm not living here anymore. I hate this
Mm-hmm.
city, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, and you don't want that. When you leave here to get away from this. So when you leave here, you don't want that, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
You're
I
like,
also look at it as like when I go places now, even though it's like we're working and we're like fucking running and gunning between cities and stuff. It's like I'm like it's vacation, dude. I'm like I'm paying. I'm like we're going out, and they're like, let's go to McDonald's instead of this restaurant. I'm going, no, we're going to the fucking restaurant. Like I'm,
right.
you know what I mean? I'm like we'd have to buy food at home anyway. Like it's not like all of a sudden we're pinching these pennies when we're on the road. Like we would all be
Yeah.
eating lunch whether we were in New York or Cleveland.
Right.
I'm
Exactly.
having a nice lunch because I'm staying at a fucking Airbnb for the next 3 days and we have like a 4 hour drive. So I'm like, I'm going to have a nice lunch. That's what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
it's so funny. I'm not even talking nice lunch. I'm talking like something with a waiter, like a
Right.
fucking
Like a
Applebee's.
sandwich. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
exactly. I'm like, I'm just not
Right.
eating over a trash can at a fucking truck stop. I'm not doing that.
Dude, that feeling of like being like, all right, I mean, I could just get like a couple bags of almonds and some Slim Jims, and you're like, yo, just go get a burger, you maniac.
Yeah, it's just
Like,
$12. What are we doing?
right.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it'll be so much better for you mentally, you
that's
know?
that's that's the whole thing on the road is like what makes me, even if it's more money, if it's more time, whatever, I go, this will make me feel better. I
Yeah,
won't feel like a cockroach eating food in the middle of like fucking Indiana or something. Like I need to feel okay.
right. Some people thrive on that, and God bless them, but I never did, you know?
No, I did,
I,
like I said with the romance. I did. I'm like, oh, we're doing it, baby. We're the road. Like this is what you see in the documentaries. This is what you read in the books. Like, and it's cool. It was cool for like 6 times maybe, and then I'm like, I can't. I just can't do it anymore.
I have a buddy who's a comic out in LA now, and we both started in Pittsburgh, and we did this college show together, and they're like, we'll give you like a meal voucher at the end of the show, and it's like the standard college thing. Like there's a Taco Bell, there's a Pizza Hut Express, there's a sandwich
Sure.
and wrap place, whatever. So like the show's like 30 minutes before it starts, he like leaves and then he comes back with like an egg salad sandwich. I'm like, where did you get that? I was like, we don't get our things till after. He's like, I just walked to 7-Eleven. So you got an egg salad sandwich from 7-Eleven? He's like, they have the best egg salad sandwiches. I said, dude, there is something mentally, physically going on here where you have convinced yourself that 7-Eleven has
Yeah.
the best egg salad sandwiches. That is
Yeah.
not true.
It's
That
Stockholm
is
syndrome. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's fully convinced that like this is a life that's okay to lead. It's like, no, it's not, man. Oh, come back to reality. It's insane that we think we have to live like
Right.
that. Imagine that kid was a nice, sweet, young, like 8-year-old boy at some point who
Yeah.
now has convinced himself that 7-Eleven has the best egg salad sandwiches.
Yeah.
That's like that humanity has gone so far rogue that that's okay. It's crazy what we tell ourselves. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And convince ourselves of. I want to ask you this now that things are rolling so well for you and the podcast and for Foley, you are running and gunning. But did you have any moments where you thought, like in your career, where you were like, this is going to be it? This is the thing that breaks me. Maybe it's the Live at Gotham, something like that, where you're like, this is the thing that gets me to the next level. And I know this is going to happen. And then it just doesn't. It doesn't go well. It doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah, man, I've been working with Foley for like, since that fateful night he put me up on stage at the Raven Lounge and I bombed
Yeah.
and ruined the show. That was like our first collaboration. But I mean, this is our third podcast we've done together. You know what I mean? Like, we've done multiple, we've written scripts, we've done sketches, we've done literally everything, right? And it's just like that thing where you just have to. So like, yeah, everything up until now. I mean, there was, 2 or 3 failed podcasts before this one. There was web series, there was sketches, everything didn't go. And everything was like, we put our heart in. We did this one thing that I loved and I still do. And the concept was great. And we had great guests. It was called Last Spot of the Night. I think it's still up on maybe like my YouTube channel or something. The idea was we would sit down at the end of, because like, especially like in New York, we would love like once we started getting weekend spots and you're running around, you're working a couple different clubs and the bar shows. It's like, oh fuck, all right, I got a 7:15 here, and I got an 8:20 here, and then I got to go to down to the Lower East Side to do some shitty bar show. Then I got to come back up, and we would all meet at the end of the night and have like a beer and be like, yo, what'd you have tonight? This one heckler, this, this, what, it's just like, then, just telling the stories, the romance behind it. I
Right.
needed to catch the train. I missed it. So I had to run up and like, just like that whole thing. So we would, at the end of the night, we would meet with comics and like, we paid this guy to come and shoot it. It looked great. Everything. I mean, it was a little off. It wasn't fantastic, but, and it was that. I'm like, this is it, dude. Like we put like, all of our money that we had, which wasn't much, but we were like, I'm like, this is it. This is going to be the one. New York Comedy Club let us use the space next door that they had. It was like, we had like Andrew Schultz on. We had like fucking big New York City comics to come in.
Yeah.
And, this idea is great and it's fun. And like me and Foley had the rhythm that we have. So like, it's, funny and stuff. And it just never, I mean, like, I think even Schultz's episode got like 300 views or something like that. And you're just like, fuck me. Like, okay, what do we do with this now?
Yeah.
You're just stuck. You're like, this is the last 4 months of my life of figuring this out, shooting it, editing it, paying all the money, all the disposable income I had, and then just doesn't get off the ground.
And it's done. Yeah. It's just gone.
It's gone. And
like,
I love I still do. I'm like, could we bring that back somehow? Like, it was very production heavy. But still, it's like, fuck. It was like, I loved it. I know that's why we were just like in love with like everybody meeting up at the end of the night and like talking shit and, talking shop like that.
It'd be a great live show. I feel like where if you were able to get a room somewhere in the city at like 1:30, 2 a.m. and it was like you book everybody after their last shows and you go, come and talk. Don't do any material. Just talk about your shows.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty good. I never thought of that. The only problem with that, the 2 a.m. crowd might be fucking bonkers
blitzed. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Then that's a fantastic idea.
That is just you fighting where you could already be in bed,
yes, of course. Yeah. I remember I tried to do oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
We were in Philly and we're like, midnight show. This is brilliant. Everybody will come hang here. Similar thing. We were like, midnight show, showcase style. And by 12:04, we were like, this was the worst decision we've ever made. This is chaos.
It's like Zanies in Chicago, their Old Town room. I don't know if they still do, but they were running like 11:30 or midnight shows there. They do 3 shows on a weekend. And that last show, I mean, sometimes it'd be busy, but sometimes there's 30 people in the audience and they're torched out of their minds.
Sleeping and
yeah. Because by the time if you're in the middle of the show or God forbid closing, you are going on. It's the latest and farthest these people have been from when they woke up.
Yes, and it's also too like that show, like those late shows. Each comic gets a completely different audience because that 10, 12, 15 minutes drastically changes per drink, per sleepiness, per rowdiness, per everything. Like because New York Comedy Club does, I think like their 11:45s or 11:30s or something. I would be getting like 1:30 a.m. spots and stuff like that, or 1:15 spots. And the show runs late because it's the last show on the docket. So like the other first 2 or 3 shows have run late. So this gets pushed back. This starts 20 minutes late. And I mean, there was a while where I was closing those shows out and it was just fucking babysitting. Like you couldn't even attempt to do material. You're just like, it's like whack-a-mole of like, you shut up. Hey, you get out of here. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, do it. I'd rather do like a 4 p.m. show. At least like get some material.
Right. At least people were like awake and they're alert, to what's happening. Yeah. Before we get out of here, I want to ask, what is the thing that you do after a bad show? Something doesn't go well, whatever it is. What's the thing that you go to immediately after the show that sort of pulls you out of it? Is there something that you always do or a place you always end up when things don't go well?
Yeah, there's pretty much like I do like last night I had a rough one, not rough. The crowd wasn't great, whatever, and I never try to, try to be like the fucking comics comic. Like it's never, it's never their fault. I didn't do my job, Seinfeld type thing. But it
Right.
was just tough. It just, whatever. Between me, you, and the listeners, the host fucking stunk. But and I had to go up right after him. It just wasn't set. The table wasn't set. Now I gotta like fucking, try to tap dance a little bit to get because in my head I'm like, it was one of those sets where I'm like, I'm going up and I'm working all my I got these 4 jokes, fucking, and then like they're just not receptive to jokes, when you're
Yeah.
like, so whatever. And I immediately get off stage and I'll order. There's like 3 or 4 things. Yeah, it's like in the moments after I walk out, I literally go, I hate comedy. Is when I get into the bar. I go, I fucking hate comedy, and I walk out and I'll light a cigarette, and then I for sure get a beer right there. Like I'll go back in and get a beer, and then it depends on the night of the week. That if it's like a Friday, it just keeps going. But like I'll at least have a beer, and then I'll probably go get a slice of pizza, and then for sure take an Uber home because the subway's just too long to be with your thoughts
Right. Right.
for the after like a shitty set, and then I just mull over it. So it's like I need to. It's like have you ever seen that Always Sunny where they just have to go to bed at Charlie and Frank's house? So it's like they huff the fucking one. That's what I do. I'm like I sig a beer, a slice of pizza, then I'm in an Uber, and I'm like I just let all the chemicals try to slow the
Take
brain
over.
down.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. That is it's so funny. Like every comic I feel like has a similar routine where the whole goal is to just get away from wherever they were as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I don't want
You
to
know?
be. I don't want to be in there because then like the waitresses or someone like last night, I wanted to be like they fucking sucked. I wanted to
Right.
I wanted to say that at the bar, but a kid in the front row like followed me out to like something was wrong with his drink. I don't know. So now he's at the bar, and my
Right.
buddy Mike Cannon, very funny comic, was like, "How were they?" And I wanted to be like, but the guy in the front row is in between us. I want to be like, they fucking suck, and it's this guy's fault. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
just, oh, they're all right, it's my fault. So I'm like, I get the
Yeah. Oh man. I can't thank you enough for doing this, man. This was great. Please, if people, I'm sure they know, but for the few people that don't know, where can they hear you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so our podcast with previous guest as well, right? Foley was on.
Yeah.
Is it's called Are You Garbage? It's wherever you get podcasts, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. And then I'm at Kevin Ryan Comedy on all social media.
Right on, man. Well, thanks for doing it, and continued success to you and Foley and everything you're doing, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.